seen in my experience, most people are getting divorced because of the emotional abuse, the narcissistic, toxic traits, stonewalling. Literally, when you say something about my day, and I just say,
do you believe that therapy and counseling, Christian counseling, is constructive when people are dealing with breakup, divorce, being widowed, and dealing with that grief that comes with it?
Yeah, because you need theology and therapy. And so you need someone who is skilled with practical tools and frameworks that are going to allow you to use after you've gone through what you've gone through, but they're also coded with the Word of God.
Relationship matters, I can tell you that, and that's why we're back again, so we can dive into the subject some more and unearth nuggets and secrets that helps you move forward in your life, because this is real talk that we're having here. And I'm so glad again to be able to enter into your home. Welcome all of CLCC. Today is your day as we continue with our discussion. I want you to like and also comment on any of the platforms that you're viewing this podcast. You may be viewing it live or potentially by repeat, but I want you to join whichever channel you are viewing this on. I want you to do that and be blessed and favored of God. And note with me that as you do so, it really helps you stay in tune with what's happening as it relates to irregular events and updates and etc. Listen, I am delighted again to have a special guest coming all the way from Baltimore, Maryland. Pastor Josh Beer is a great servant of God, and we certainly thank God for him right now. He is joining us, and I want to welcome you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here again. Another episode.
Another episode.
Yes,
another
sir.
day.
Yes.
And we're blessed and favored of God. Okay, we're speaking today about breakup and divorce. Again, this is absolutely a part of life. You know, the ideal is that it doesn't happen, but the reality is it does. So we're going to really tackle the subject matter of, breakup and divorce, because there are people dealing with it right now, people watching on this podcast who've been through it, and so forth. So let me really just open with an overview, Pastor Josh, in terms of what's your generic feeling as it relates to breakup and divorce?
I think that nobody gets married to get divorced, right? And so it comes with the strain and the emotional pull of frustration, anxiety, hopelessness. And so when I think about divorce, I think of two people separating on all spheres, emotionally, spiritually. Everything just changes. And so their worlds are almost shattered. I almost think of it as grief in a sense. So when I think about divorce, that's what I think about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah. And it's true. But your powerful analysis as you've put it. So you're saying that two worlds, and they're sort of divided apart or torn apart in some instances. That must be absolutely agonizingly difficult.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a breach. Like the one world now becomes distorted two worlds in a sense, because especially if you have kids, you're still a part of each other's life. And so learning how to navigate that, you'll need some keys and tools and frameworks to work through so that there is destiny after the dilemma.
I like that.
Yeah.
Destiny after the dilemma.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does someone heal? They've been married for a certain amount of time. Again, we are in no ways endorsing breakup or divorce, because I really don't think that's something anyone should aspire to, nor should we take it lightly.
Yeah.
Because it's not something to be taken lightly. It is an enormous circumstances, to take place. Two questions I want to ask, really. So I'm going to give you the first and the second. Second question, how does someone heal after that breakup? And number two, what in your mind and from the Bible are the grounds to divorce?
So I think, to answer your first question, it's my understanding that you have to acknowledge it, acknowledge the pain, but don't unpack there. So what do I mean by that? I think
that's how you heal from the pain, yeah?
Yeah, you have to acknowledge the pain. The first key to any self-healing is acknowledgement.
Yeah.
This happened to me. That's what grief is. It is acknowledging, hey, this happened to me and I didn't want it to happen. And then there's some people who are divorcing and they did want it to happen. And so you got to look at the big picture, right? So it happened to you, but don't stay in the place of pain. Let's move from pain island to pleasure island. So how do we move from the dilemma to the destiny? Divorce is a dilemma, and there's life after divorce, your destiny. How do we move from that thing to the next thing? I think we got to use some tools. I think we have to use some tools, and those tools, at least for me, in particularly in counseling, that I use is a framework that helps people. It has been do the work. Do the work. What is the work? Do the digging. What happened in the marriage that caused the breach in the marriage? But not just what they did. What part did you play in this horror story or nightmare? Because it was a dream, and then it quickly turned into. So what role did you play? I think sometimes we don't like to take accountability.
Okay.
But if you're gonna get from pain island to pleasure island, you got to take some accountability. I played a part in this relationship, in this marriage, and it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? What could you have done? What didn't you do? What trauma did you bring into that marriage that you never got healing from before you got in that marriage? What dysfunctions did you bring in that marriage that caused that marriage to breach? Like what were the things that were going on with you psychologically, emotionally, relationally? What did you see in your house? Go back to that after divorce so you can get from the dilemma to your destiny and continue on with your life.
Oh, that's good in terms of healing from.
Yeah.
What grounds, and what you said, I'm going to move on to the other question. I think what you're saying is very good and constructive, because stepping back and looking at, okay, well, what role did I play? Or what did I do in this breakup taking place? Now, there are some circumstances where the fault is predominantly on one spouse.
Yeah.
But usually it's a combination of issues. And sometimes divorce is not always the best option, because if me and you, okay, we get up from here and we do this recording in Turks and Caicos, would be nice. A lot of sunshine out.
Oh man, you just took me to a whole nother place.
The point is, though we're in a new environment, it's still me and you. And what we know about each other, and how we interact are going to be the same the scenery is not going to change our content.
Wow.
So some people divorce because they think I need to change the scenery, but they could end up in the same scenario. Second and third and fourth divorces statistically happen more. So if you divorce first, second, third, fourth,
Yeah.
the statistics are worse as you marry more. Now, that does not mean that everyone who marries second and third time are going to divorce, but the statistics show it because they've basically pulled the wrong lever. If we want to get a better result from this podcast, we need to pray and study more.
Right.
Not think by going to Turks and Caicos, we're going to get a better podcast. I mean, it might look good if we got the sea behind us, but the reality is it's still me and you. So I'm saying that to say that we have to be very prayerful and very, as you said, what was my role to play in this? Because what we don't want is to repeat the same problem by marrying someone else.
Wow.
And then,
Yeah.
there's not much change. So the second part of my question was, what grounds? Because I'm asking this because I'm hearing all kinds of reasons why people are divorcing. And some of them to me seem superficial, flimsy.
Yeah.
What grounds, when you look at the Bible, what grounds, or obviously we have to marry the Bible with relativity, but what grounds do you see that divorce might be acceptable?
Yeah, so two things: adultery and heart and heart. That's what the Bible talks about. Jesus talks about it. I believe that's Matthew 19 in verse 9. He talks about if your partner steps out of and breaks the covenant of marriage. Covenant in marriage is by intimacy through intercourse. And if you step outside of that covenant with your spouse, there's grounds for divorce. So that's number one. Number two is the heart and heart. And I think that's what you were almost not saying with the fickleness of the culture. And is that really grounds for divorce? But when I think about a heart and heart, I think about a heart that is unpenetrable. So I can't penetrate your heart in a way that I once could. So now the seed or the seeds, because I'm a man, my wife is a woman, I have to say that, in 2025, we're not on our way to divorce, but I'm using us as an example. If I come with seeds of love, joy, peace, happiness, joy, witty ideas, innovation, something creative, a dream that God has given me, and you now have a heart and heart towards me and the dreams that God has given me, I'm not necessarily saying that's grounds for divorce, but I am saying people use that as grounds for divorce. I am also saying, though, if she's no longer receptive to me as a man, as her partner, as the person that she has made covenant with me with, and vice versa, a heart and heart is grounds for divorce, biblically. So I think number one is adultery.
Okay, and two's
Heart and heart.
heart and heart.
Mm-hmm.
What about physical violence?
Yeah, I think that's a heart and heart. I think that like a heart and heart is not just emotional. It starts off as emotional and then it expresses itself in other ways. So a heart and heart could be, I don't protect you like I once used to. I don't care for you the way that I used to. So I don't do the things that I promised you that I would do. As your man, I'm supposed to cover, protect, provide. If when I come home, when we get in an argument, you don't feel protected from me, but you feel like you need to be protected from me, we're in dangerous grounds. So yes, I think that I think abuse, not just emotional, but physical.
I'm talking about physical, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'm realizing is that sometimes the physical abuse is the last straw.
True.
Is the straw that breaks the camel's back. I've seen, in my experience, most people are getting divorced because of the emotional abuse, the narcissistic, toxic traits, stonewalling. Literally, when you say something about my day, and I just say, I literally ignore you. That's emotional.
And you would say that, but I wouldn't say that's grounds for divorce.
Emotional abuse?
Now, so here's the deal.
Yeah.
Physical abuse to me is the apex, or the apex of the manifestation. But hard and hard obviously is an area. But I think if we get more specific,
Right.
we speak about physical abuse, adultery, you've mentioned.
Right.
To me, those are grounds. Everything else should be worked on. And could be worked on with a third and fourth and fifth party to try and get the other person to hear and to learn.
Yeah, I would go a step further. I don't think that there's anything a marriage can't overcome.
Right.
Love covers all, and so
physical violence becomes very dangerous, obviously.
Yeah, it does.
And there can be forgiveness for adultery, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I've counseled couples who have been unfaithful.
Sure.
And they have reconciled their marriage, and they're living fulfilled marriages now. So I think that there is not a mount in love that two people that are committed to Christ can't conquer.
And I also think it depends.
Right.
It depends as well, because if there is something that one of the spouses have done that is grounds for divorce, I think that needs to be looked into at whether that is a result of a deeper problem. Okay. Or whether that is just how they want to be. And obviously a repeated scenario that one says, I'm just doing this no matter what and I won't change. That to me then says, well, this is too much.
Grounds for
But let's go to the, we could go either physical violence or adultery. Let's pick one. Which one do you want to pick?
Physical.
Okay. So physical is wrong and terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And should never ever happen. But that could be a situation where they're at each other and they're aggressive and arguing and throwing stuff at each other, and one gets the better of the other.
Yeah.
So you've sort of got to talk about the lead up as well. Now that does not justify the violence at the end, but you've got to deal with the root cause. Yeah. Because if you don't deal with if you just isolate it, potentially that may not be the wisest thing to do.
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think
going back to the adultery part as well. Usually it's because of a deeper issue with the marriage. Usually,
understood.
There is dissatisfaction somewhere, and so it manifests itself that way. But it's not just that the person thinks, oh, that's what I just want to do, just because I want to do it. Now, if it's a lifestyle, then we're talking about something very different. But if it's a manifestation of a deeper problem, perhaps that deeper problem can be looked at as well.
Yeah. So I mentioned emotional abuse. But I think when I look at the text, it says, wives, submit unto your husband as he submits unto the Lord. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. So when I think about how Christ loves the church and how messed up the church is, how jacked up the church is, how we sin daily and continue to strive to get it right, but can't quite always get it right. I think that in the same way that if a spouse does not honor or revere their spouse and use emotional abuse as a weapon, because it's almost sophisticated warfare in a sense. So that's why I would say, because I've ran into personally people within the context of my family that have experienced emotional abuse, and what it does to the other person psychologically is, now physical abuse does it as well, but the emotional abuse that it does to the person's psyche, confidence, their ability to show up and care for their own self, it crushes them. So I still do believe that love
covers that.
Oh yeah, I do, but in the same way that there's a deeper issue with adultery, in the same way there's a deeper issue with the physical abuse,
The emotion.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it has to be.
It's visceral.
Yeah, I agree, because really, if I was to use an analogy, I would say divorce is the nuclear button. There are wars and battles across the world all the time. We've seen the wars in Israel, in Ukraine,
Right.
wars going on in Africa and all over the world. But for someone to hit the nuclear button, it's got to be extreme.
Yeah.
You may have little battles here and there, and you may need to negotiate a ceasefire, which we've seen happen lately. But try to do whatever you can before you hit that red button, because the problem is with the red button, there's no going back, usually. So I'm saying that divorce should be in the most extreme circumstances where there's no real chance of being able to get a result out of the situation. And if it becomes dangerous, there's some dangerous
Absolutely.
and things like that. So
Flee, run.
Yeah. But it happens, and people do get divorced. And there are also situations which, and I want to get your take on this, which is not necessarily divorce, but there are those who are widowed, where a spouse has passed away, a spouse has died. That can be a very difficult, devastating issue, can't it?
Yeah, because grief is like a cloud that won't go away.
Wow.
So if you don't have a fresh wind that comes with people, environments, spaces, and places, then grief will sit and rest, and you won't find any relief. And so my advice to the person that is grieving a spouse is get in environments that feed you and don't drain you.
Wow. That's nice.
Yeah. So a church would be a great environment because faith is in the church. Faith, my father-in-law always says this to me, faith is built in community. Faith is not built individualistically. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so it's imperative that you get in the right environment, because the right environment can push and propel you into better days. So we want to get you from grieving to gleaning.
Nice.
Right? Gleaning on his word, gleaning on his promises, and remembering who that person was.
Right.
And if they were a believer, then we have reason to rejoice. We have reason to rejoice because they are now in a home that has not been built with human hands, but with the hands of God. So
that's powerful.
Yeah.
I'm just finished my third book, Crown to Conquer. Actually.
Of the year.
No, not third.
Oh,
book
you
of the
wrote?
year.
Yes. Yes.
And it's called Crown to Conquer. It talks about overcoming grief, basically.
Wow.
And looks at different aspects of it, like what you just mentioned, widowing. And I wish I put some of what you just said in there, because those were good nuggets.
Wow.
But they say that a divorce and breakup is almost as devastating or close to somebody passing away.
Yeah.
So that's a big devastation. Do you believe that therapy and counseling, Christian counseling, is constructive when people are dealing with breakup, divorce, being widowed, and dealing with that grief that comes with it?
Yeah, because you need theology and therapy, right? So what ends up happening in church culture, capital C church culture, is that when we go through grief, pain, loss, divorce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we have the propensity to superimpose spirituality that's not applicable to your everyday life. So we use spirituality as a almost smokescreen so we don't deal with the heart issues that we're dealing with. But what Christian therapy, and my father is a Christian psychotherapist, and so what I've learned from him is that therapy, it gets to the root of the heart.
Bishop Bear or Bishop Brown?
My dad, Bishop Bear. Yes,
okay.
yes. And so therapy gets to the root of the heart. It gets to what we would call the soul work. And you need soul work done when you are going through grief and pain and devastation. And so you need someone who is skilled with practical tools and frameworks that are going to allow you to use after you've gone through what you've gone through, but they're also coated with the Word of God.
Wow,
yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So Christian good therapy, you believe, is very
Absolutely
vital and important.
Yeah,
in terms of dealing with that. Yeah,
absolutely, you need it.
Yeah,
it's healthy.
Yeah, and in terms of breakups, some people have been engaged, some have been dating, and those breakups have stepped in. And really, as we're talking about it, even right now, there's an escalation in child and parent breakups as well, which is real devastating. How would you advise people who is dealing with that, not just marriage, not just widowed, but engagement, dating, children, those sort of breakups?
Yeah.
Would it be along those same lines? What would you say?
Yeah, I think in breakup, that's the hard thing, right? Because that's a grief, right? I remember dating before I got married that it's a different kind of grief, because especially now, because you get to see them if you don't unfollow them.
Wow.
They're going to be on your Facebooks, they're going to be on your Instagram, so you got your TikToks and all the social media. So it's a different kind of grief because they're not dead, they're still walking around. So you got to learn to move on while seeing someone that you once loved still live, and they're moving on with their life. And those questions start to come up. What did they do that I didn't do? Why did she get the ring and I didn't get the ring? Why did he get this and I did not? It's all of that. And so I think you really need somebody who just doesn't have the Spirit of God, but has the tactical frameworks and tools in his or her toolkit that can help you move on with your life. When I think about families or parents that, in a sense, almost divorce their kids.
Or the other way around.
Right. Or, yeah, they're not talking anymore. It's a real reality. Something happened. Mom got upset. Mom didn't do right. And what we end up doing for the child to the mother relationship is we end up blaming mom or dad that they didn't show up with or for us when we needed them the most. Point of transparency, it took me having my own child to understand why my dad made the sacrifices that he made.
Wow.
I didn't understand it.
Wow.
And so sometimes, and I'm not being mean, sometimes we just gotta go through life experiences to understand, well, maybe they that's all they knew what to do.
Sure.
But from the parent down, I don't know. I couldn't see myself separating from either of my daughters. But if it did happen, I think you really got to put that ego down and really get the help and really prioritize prayer, because even when you can't get them into the room with the therapist, you can always get God in your room.
Amen.
And talk to your God about your issues. So yeah.
And obviously we can also use the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah, I love
he
that
left
story.
for a season.
Mm.
He didn't leave permanently.
Mm.
And there are some issues that are seasonal. because families are complex,
Can I say something
complicated
really quick?
scenario.
Can I say
Go
something
ahead,
real
go
quick,
on.
real quick?
Take it.
I always like that story, not because the prodigal son left, but we never look at that story from the son who stayed consistent and stayed loyal. How
Did he feel
does he feel
when the son
when
comes
the
back?
son comes back? He gets the ring,
The robe.
the robe, and the son gets goose egg. At least that's what the Bible said. How does he feel? So I want to know what their relationship is like when you stayed loyal to mom and dad and your brother or your sister did not, or your family member did not stay
And
loyal
then
to
the one
the
that wasn't loyal gets the attention.
and they get the attention and everybody receives them back. And you couldn't imagine in your wildest dreams to do that, because you know if you did that, your family would ostracize you. And so I wonder always what he feels like when he goes through what he goes through.
And what's your take on it?
He has to be mad. I know I would be mad. I know the way my spirituality is set up right now, my maturity, my knee-jerk response would be, this is not fair. Why is he getting such treatment and he hasn't been loyal to the father?
But then, having said that,
Yeah.
it then depends on how the father operates. If
Yeah.
the father can operate in a way, he's been betrayed by the prodigal son,
Mm-hmm.
and the prodigal son's gone out
Right.
and then come back,
Yeah.
and he's wise enough, because some fathers in that position would be like, no, you stay with the pigs,
Yep.
okay, because
yeah.
you've embarrassed the family.
Yeah.
And that's what they would have done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that father has been talking to the son that was left, saying, look, one day your brother will come back, and this is how we'll treat him.
Yeah.
So he's prepared him.
Love it.
And maybe he's talking to him along the way, saying, look, I'm giving him the robe, but I'm giving him the ring, but, and keeping him on side. That's what a wise father would do. I mean,
Yeah.
this is now biblical conjecture.
Yeah,
'cause
it is. We don't know.
It doesn't
It's a
reference
parable.
that. Yeah,
It's a parable. So, but the point that I'm trying to push is
I get
the
your
family
point.
dynamics are so complex. Whether it's divorce or whether it's you and your sister, or you and your brother falling out, or I'm talking about the person.
It creates more complexity.
Oh, it just creates so much.
Because the prodigal son's come back, brother's saying, well, why is he getting better treatment? That's the reality of what we're dealing with today.
And that almost feels
You
like
know,
a grief for some people.
Mm.
That can feel like a grief. Like, I was so loyal to this. I was loyal to this family. I didn't get anything. I didn't get the inheritance. I didn't get the when mom and dad passed away, I did not get their
And I cared for them alone.
And I cared for them alone.
Where were the siblings?
Where were you?
Yeah.
And you came in, you got something. That's a grief.
It really is.
Yeah.
Something you said earlier, which was quite interesting, and I want to raise that point.
Yeah.
You mentioned the fact that there's different levels of grief. One is when someone's taken away. Another is when you are now disenfranchised with them, they're disenfranchised with you, and you've parted normal relations, but they're still around. So you're on an emotional roller coaster because you know, okay, we're not the same anymore, but they're still there. That takes some level of management and complexity. I'm going to go a little further as well, because I want you to answer that. And then in speaking about that, breakup and divorce, as we're mentioning, creates a different dynamic as it relates to parenting, hybrid families.
Yeah.
You know, so this is a whole nother set of complexities. You came in with your kids, I came in with mine. Now, are you favoring yours and you think I'm favoring mine? Or however it goes, you know, there's different sort of scenarios now,
Right.
which are created. So it's, what I'm really saying is existing in a complex relational environment.
Yeah.
Because that's what really takes place. How do you navigate, man of God, through that?
Yeah, I think keep the main thing the main thing. So in co-parenting, because the marriage is no longer the main thing. What is the main thing? The children. And so navigating that complex arena of emotions, of regret, of abandonment, of rejection, can be difficult. But if we keep the children the main thing and not the conflict, we can make ground. It's baby steps, not giant steps, with co-parenting. And so sometimes when we're not fully healed after the divorce, because that does take time, what ends up happening is we end up bringing the suppressed emotion into the way that we deal with the other parent, but we use the child as the smokescreen.
Right.
So you really upset because she found a new boo. That's why you're really upset. And you don't want him around your children. But the reality is you should want her to move on, but you don't want her to move on. So you're making life hard for her with the children. It's those kind of complex things. So I think when we prioritize the children's health, where do you want your children to be? Spiritually, emotionally, mentally? Are you doing what's best for your child in the moment? If you keep the child at the center, then the conflicts, they're null and void. And I also think that
so focus.
Yeah, focus.
So even though you've got to deal with a spouse who might still be at the family functions, or a relative, or a child, or whatever the scenario is, you're saying is important to keep focus
on whatever that is.
Right. And not be distracted by it until maybe, healing comes or God really.
Yeah, get grace. You're going to need grace for divorce. You're going to need grace for the days, the weeks, the months, the years after the divorce. So you're going to need grace for patience, gentleness, kindness,
tolerance,
the fruits of the Spirit.
It was Paul that said, I sought the Lord thrice, and then he said, his grace is sufficient for me.
Yeah.
His strength is made perfect in my weakness.
Yeah.
So really, it's about tolerating a situation that's not ideal.
Yeah.
And that means you're dealing with it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So there's ups and downs. If I've never been through divorce, but ups and downs in terms of divorce or breakup, family breakups. I've had difficult family situations at times with some members. It's just a reality, but you just got to embrace it and try and deal with it as much as you can, because there's all kind of dynamics. There's jealousy, and those sort of things. So tolerance and
when I think
prayer.
of that I would couple what you just said, because that was so clear and poignant. I would also couple that with when he says his grace is sufficient for you. His strength is made perfect in your weakness. That requires a level of vulnerability with God about your weakness. And if you come to God like you're the strongest thing, like you come to everybody else in your life, God can't use your weakness as a catalyst to produce strength in your life.
I love it.
So when he says come weak, you got to
be vulnerable to God.
You got to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be vulnerable.
Yeah, not trying to be
strong. Why are you trying to be tough with God? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like you don't think he knows you.
Yeah.
He knows you better than you know you.
Yeah.
He can count the hairs on your head. He knows you. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Because we've got all kind of things like blended families now. That again takes a new level of tolerance and staying close to God and being sensitive and learning how to deal and manage and navigate through that. So again, that's an interesting dynamic, that people have to go through. Talk to someone, they're dealing with a breakup as it relates to they've been engaged or they've been dating and they're dealing with that breakup? How's the best way for them to deal with that?
Diamond are a girl's best friend. But when we buy diamonds, you aren't paying for what you think you're paying for. You're paying for the end result. That's what you think. But you're not paying for the end result. You're paying for a process that you didn't see. What am I saying? Diamonds have to go through heat, pressure, and they have to be cut several times. But diamonds start off as coal. So diamonds have to go through seasons of heat, seasons of pressure, and seasons of cutting. Just because they didn't marry you doesn't mean that you're not valuable. You had to go through a season of heat, you had to go through a season of pressure, and you had to go through a season of cutting. God had to allow that cutting and cutting that relationship, because that relationship was no longer serving you. His ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. And after you've gone through this process of being cut from people, spaces, and places, you're getting ready to shine more brilliantly. So what you went through, it wasn't working just on you, it's working through you.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man. God, I love that. How do you deal with the shame? People know that was your fiance, that was your spouse. Because divorce and breakup is almost like a character credit check in some people's minds.
Wow.
And they add on to that. They're like, okay, that person's had that person's had this. They've divorced. It follows them like a dark cloud. How do you deal with that and get past that, where your self-value and self-esteem can begin to rise again?
Yeah, I think it's key and critical to understand that you are not the result of your past mistakes.
Good.
You're not.
I love that.
Your identity is actually not even in marriage. Your first identity is in Christ.
Yeah.
You're a new creature. The old is passed away.
Amen.
And so I want to tell somebody, the old is passed away. You are not the shame. Shame is just a lie that the enemy uses to keep us in hiding. And when you put a plant in shade or shame, it can't grow. So the enemy wants to keep you in shame, which is a dark space. Nothing can grow in the dark. You have to have light. So when your identity is now in Christ, you now have the light of the world in you so that you can grow like God has created you to grow. And so my advice to them is, you are not the divorce. It happened to you, but God can use anything. God can use anything. He can use the shame to seal your success. He can use pain to produce power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would just tell somebody, I know it's hurtful, but it helped you, because we know that all things work together
for the good.
God can use the good, the bad, and the ugly. He can use the ugly divorce. He can use the ugly shame of your past to propel you into a beautiful future.
And I also think it's important for us to be delivered from always wanting to be accepted by other people's thinking. What they think of you matters so much.
People pleasing.
People pleasing. Jesus did something so strategic when he was on earth. He was saying, I do nothing except my Father. And he followed the example of his Father all the time. So what he was doing was pleasing his Father. And if it was at the expense of not pleasing the Pharisees and Sadducees and anyone else, he would say, well, that's just the way it's going to be. And I think we've got to get to a place where we know in life, you know what? It doesn't matter necessarily what other people think if God is good with me and I'm happy with myself. Because if not, we'll be following all the time, you know, the appreciation of others and this, you know, certification from others. So I think we've got to get to a stage where we're like, listen, it's what I do. If not, we'll be driving cars, wearing clothes, all that to please others. I think we got to please ourselves first before we try and please other people.
Absolutely.
And that way we know this happened, I'm over it, and no one's going to look at me negatively because God is still and has done some things in me.
Absolutely. I agree.
This has been excellent, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Again, Pastor Josh Beer. Listen, this has been another glorious episode of Change Your Life podcast. I want you to do this, please. I want you to join us for Sunday service. It's we call it Super Bowl Sunday, and a lot goes into that. I want you to come along. Come as you are, and God will do the rest. We have services every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. The information is on the screen. And I want you to stay connected to us as we move to the next level. Stay blessed, and we'll see you next week for another episode.